Welcome to another episode of the Trailblazers Experience Podcast, the podcast where we have candid conversations with women sharing their career journeys. Today's guest is the formidable Frederike, a pioneering voice in change management and former CEO of Next. With a career spanning luxury retail, operational restructuring, and culture building, Frederike is known for a passion for constant change and her candid, no-nonsense approach to leadership. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's really great to have you. And I know we were just talking about how we can't believe it's almost Christmas and how in Germany it's all about Advent calendars. You know, that's how many can you have? How many can you enjoy? Such a pleasure to have you joining from another country. This is the joys of the internet. But yeah, before we even start, I always like to take it all the way back. If you can tell me a little bit about yourself, what led you into this career path and what was sort of the early days were for you? Because you describe your drive as constant change as a passion, but where did that mindset come from?
I think the mindset itself is just that I'm very easily bored. And I think this is something, to be very honest, the story goes really back to my parents. They have always moved across the world for my dad's job to the US and then different countries in Europe that I lived in. And it was always entrepreneur mindset, right? So it was always, you got to work to get to where you want to go. This is something that I've done in my private life, but I've also done in business, as you could see, or as you already mentioned. But for me, it's always like, if you sit still, I cannot sit still. And this is something that is probably like the ADHD mindset as well that I have in Tiger. But for me personally, if you sit still, you lose your opportunities. You want to see something new. My day never has enough hours. And this is something that I'm always in motion. And for someone doing that, yes, on one side, it sounds very, very tiring. But on the other hand, you always see something new. So for me, it's realizing that there is never enough hours in a day to see what I want to see, to travel where I want to travel, and to actually work on what I want to work on. Has always been the drive to be this kind of, in Germany, you call it a yo-yo, like the toy where you jump it up and down. And when it's down, it's still in motion, right? For me, that was always something that motivated me very well. Yeah. And for me to decide it was a passion because I needed to do it. So at one point I just decided, okay, then I can already enjoy it, right? So I don't only have to do it to fill my day, but then I can also have fun doing that. And the phrase constant change as a passion was actually motivated by one of my friends who told me that have fun while you're doing it, because otherwise you will only forget yourself in the process. So yeah, it came up as a child, always dirty, always playing around in the mud, and still as an adult where I look for mud that I can play with.
That is so interesting, isn't it? And the fact that you realize that really early on that you should enjoy, the career stage or personal stage that you're in. It takes some people 20 or 30 years to come to that point. So talk to me about, career choices that you've made. What was like your first career? What did you actually think you wanted to do when you were growing up?
I just took a look at that a couple of months ago when I was moving. In German high school, you get this book, graduation book, right? And you have to write in where you want to live and what you want to do with your future. And I wrote down that I want to be a CEO. There was something... I also wrote...
That is amazing. Yeah.
I want to have a farm, right? I want to have a farm with a white picket fence and the Labradoodle as the Americans do. So there was a lot of variety in that book, I can tell you. But I wrote down I wanted to become a CEO because I saw my dad being very integer while still raising up the ranks and then become an entrepreneur himself. And I always saw being a CEO, you have the power to change things. That was probably my mindset when I was 18. And then I did international studies and I worked for my parents' company. And then I got into Audemars Piguet, which was luxury watches at that time, right? And that was very international, very Swiss driven though. And I immediately saw that if you have a title, you can make more decisions and you have more power among other peoples because they don't take you for granted, but they take you as a special person. So for me at that point, to be very honest, it switched. I didn't enjoy it. I just wanted more. I wanted the title. I wanted to raise up the ranks because I saw, okay, if I want to do more, I need to have it. So this gathering opportunity came along and I I still enjoyed it. I think at the point in time, I was more like working towards something. I always wanted to have this title. And then I switched because I was getting bored. I was having all the same projects all along. And there was this glass ceiling, which is still very, very active in the luxury industry. And I decided, okay, if I cannot break it, I'm just going to jump through it into another company, right? So I changed to Chronex, where it was still founder-led by very young founders. Still a scale up at that time. And then I rose up really quickly in the ranks. And it was at this point in time still was title driven, but it was also driven of just having the opportunity to work in a team that didn't have that much hierarchy, but more focused on teamwork. So different teams on different projects. And then I realized once I had the title, it didn't change. And I was still passionate about my work. I love working. Still love working today, every day, like getting up in the morning. It's like this inner momentum to do work in the morning. But the title didn't change anything about either myself or the drive itself, because it was never over. Because now I had the title, what now? And at that moment, I really felt lost, because everyone was like, oh my God, you have this title and you're so important. But my work didn't change, right? I was still writing Christmas letters by hand. I was still packaging packages. You know, like the normal CEO says, yeah, I'm still grounded. I still package packages with the logistics team sometimes.
But you didn't want to do that, yeah?
No, I still did it because it was what was needed, but the title itself didn't bring me any happiness, or it didn't bring me the feeling of, wow, now I've achieved something, because for everyone else, it felt very important. But for me, it was just, I woke up on Monday morning at a title.
I mean, that is so interesting. I mean, first of all, kudos for you putting, I want to be a CEO in your graduation book. I want to be the boss. I want to be the one who makes the decisions, and quickly realizing, okay, if that's the path that I need to take, this is what I need to do. And you sort of went the other way around, because I know a lot of people who have family businesses, they tend to actually go and work elsewhere and then end up in the family business. But you worked family business and then was like, right, you went to AP. I mean, we all know the watches, and that's a different path, a different way. How was that for you entering into the luxury space? Because you did some major things when you were there. So talk me through that process. So how was it working for a luxury brand of that caliber? And what was sort of the key lessons you learned, throughout the different stages while you were there?
I think the most important part is that I was kind of headhunted in there. So I didn't even know the brand when I started, right? For me, everyone else was like, oh my God, you're working for a luxury, but one of the top luxury brands. For me, I work for a company that produces watches. I had no idea about. I'd never owned a watch before in my life, right? So the big advantage I had, it was still a family business at that time. It was still family-led by the Audemars and the Piguet families. So for me, that was the feeling like I felt home, because it was the same kind of decision-making. At that time, only about 270 employees. Now it's more than 2,000 worldwide. So it was still a very limited number of people you had to connect with. They were very open, as the German market was stable, but it was like very limited in comparison to the other, for example, Swiss market or the American market. They were happy about everything you did. So every kind of interaction, every email flow you changed. There was not even a CRM system back in the day, right? So every kind of interaction you had with the client was new and special to the client, but also special to the company. So there was just a lot of space that you could fill up with your own ideas, as long as you pulled through. The major thing was, if you put something on your table, you have to eat it. Mm-hmm. And this is something that led me through my whole life. Like, if you are proactive, you also have to follow through the project. Somehow got kind of mixed with my personality, right? So in the company, I was known as the fixer. I was known as the person who could throw everything on the table and she will find a way, also at limited cost. So it already started back then, because if I wouldn't spend it on my personal time, like, why would I spend it on the company's dime? This is something that always, me and the company, whichever company I worked for, was always the same. So they really looked for someone who had this kind of attitude. And they also looked for someone very young, because I started when I was starting my 20s, right? So I think it wasn't match made in heaven at that point in time. The clients in Germany, as I mentioned, were at this point in time, there were only collectors, only people who were very knowledgeable about the watches, who knew more about the watches than I or our watchmakers did. So I learned from our clients. And this is something also, they were 40, 50, 60 years old. I was starting on my 20s. Most likely I was the age of their children, but they explained everything to me. And I was like a sponge. Every information that everyone could give me, I would just take in and then work on it and then try to make it better in the next kind of project I came along with. So it was just an endless learning opportunity. And the market was still very unsaturated. So you could still do whatever you want to do. I think if you take a look at the luxury lifestyle today, or even at the luxury brands today, they are a lot more limited because they're also in a lot of big conglomerations. And for me, it was the biggest advantage that AP is still family owned today, and it was very independent. So there was not a rule book, but we also had a CEO who was reaching for the stars, who said, we want to be a stable and a progressive company, but we also want to be a little bit cooler than the rest. So do something that shakes up. So he was not afraid of mixing up the business. He was not afraid of maybe also telling some people, no, we don't want to do that. We want to do it completely different. So this is, I would say, one of the biggest drivers in my whole career were male mentors who gave me the opportunity to do whatever I want as long as it worked out.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the time, because I've done digital transformation work, change management works, and in legacy-driven businesses, the only way it works is if people are prepared to take that chance and say, look, what's the worst that can happen? We will make this change. And of course, we will learn, but we'll still bring the business further than it was before. So you went into this business, founder-led, entrepreneurial, smaller at that time, and able to say, right, I'm proposing this. This is how we're going to see it through. And just being, having the balls to just say, look, let's try this. Let's speak to our customers in a way that we can also understand them. And it feels like, there were those ultra high net worth customers, very knowledgeable, those customers that you just want to keep. When you create your email flow, it's really all about that personalization. So yeah, it sort of feels like your career has been successful, even with moving to TeP&x, because there was that entrepreneurial spirit, because there was that opportunity to optimize processes and transform, change, which in more, I guess to say, bigger businesses, conglomerates or PLCs is a bit challenging. You mentioned that you got to that CEO role and you were like, oh my God, right, I've reached it now. Now what? What was then the tipping point then? What did you do next? Because I'm sure there are a few women listening to the podcast who, it might not be a CEO role, it might be a creative director role or other roles where they've reached that top and they've realized, oh my goodness, okay, I'm here now. What next? What did you do for yourself then?
There are two aspects of that. I can tell you what I did. And now, with a little bit like 2 years after, I can tell you what I should have done.
Love it. Let's dive in.
What I did is I went out with my friends. I popped a bottle of champagne and told myself I've reached every goal I've ever set for myself. The next day, I started working business as usual. I was very overwhelmed with the attention, especially for me, I love to put people on a stage and I love to put people in front when they have produced a very great product or a very good project. I personally do not need the limelight. I'm very confident with myself. I think I'm the shit at some point. So I don't need people to tell me that. But there was a lot of media attention also at the same time we were going through a restructuring, right? And a total diversion of the company. So all of these prospects came at the same time and it very overwhelmed me. Like this, everyone was looking at me and everyone was looking, what is she doing next? Asking these questions that you just asked, like, what are you going to do next? And I was like, well, I'm going to rescue the company, right? And I'm going to do whatever needs to be done. But I didn't really know what needed to be done because I had never been in the situation before, but I don't also have anyone in my surroundings that had ever been in a situation before. Because even though I'm the youngest of my friendship group, no one else was that high in a position at this point in time.
Oh, there's no one to talk to lean on, to ask the questions,
So I had to talk to our lawyers and our accountants and the people who were working with me on the new restructuring of the company. But these were people who do this on a daily basis, right? So they are very knowledgeable, but emotionally, empathy-wise, they don't understand where I am because I was completely lost. So for me, at this point in time, I did business as usual. I just pulled through and I never really, really enjoyed the CEO title, to be very honest. Like this, okay, I can just cancel an appointment or I can travel somewhere and do like different things on stage. I only ever did it for the company. I never really did it for myself, which I still think is the right way. You should not only do it for yourself. But now that I've reflected on it 2 years later, I should have maybe sat down a little bit more quietly and just realized what I'd done, how much work it took me to get here, because it took me 13 years to get there. And 13 years, to put it into perspective, is a very, very short amount of time. And I know that, like I'm in my mid-30s. I know that I've reached a level that some people are still wishing on in their 50s. But I never really took the chance to sit down and realize, okay, so now that I've fulfilled my life's plan in business, what is my next goal? And this is something that I should have done because this really got me to lose focus in my private life and my emotions, because I didn't realize that I needed a new goal to work towards, because I'm a very goal-driven person or a very results-driven person. So I didn't have a result I was aspiring to. So I was just sitting there, I was working. And then it's never enough, right? Because if you don't have something that is a deadline or a goal, you just work, and you don't realize that you're just burning yourselves out. So if I could change this into what have I done to what I would advise people to do. If you have reached a goal and you have not set yourself the next one, get yourself out of the mindset, get yourself out of the business, take a week-long holiday or something, and sit down and really understand where are you right now and where do you want to go next. Because this is what the great people do, and this is what the great systems also do. If you take a look at any AI, KI-driven programs right now, they are taking a mid-step, right? And then they're reinterpreting their information and they're focusing on something new. And I should have done that, but I was probably a little bit too shaken up in that moment. And also what comes after CEO, right?
I love the point that you made about you always want your team to shine. You always wanted to make sure that, it's your team in the limelight. And that is also a sign of good leadership, pulling them forward as well. What do you think made you a great CEO? So yes, you reached the goal. It's a major achievement. So we're clapping for you there at a young age. What made you a great CEO, in your opinion? So looking in hindsight.
That I always put the people first. I'm an extremely empathetic person, so it's very important for me that the people surrounding me are also well and doing okay. Nevertheless, I am a person who can strictly diverge between empathy and emotions and tactical business. So I look at data and information and can interpret it in a way that doesn't mix with my personal opinion. And I don't have an ego. And I have a very large ego in my private life, I have to admit that. As like a strictly a red extroverted person, I have a very big ego in my private life, but in business, the best option wins. And this is something I would say made me a good CEO, but also made me different to the rest, because I would say that a lot of CEOs or a lot of leadership personalities are still focused on their personal well-being, opposed to if the personal well-being is more important than the company. I don't think it mixes. And the other thing is, alone you will not make it. Like, you will make it to the top, but you will not stay on top, because there will always be one person who is waiting for you to fall. And if you don't treat people accordingly, there will be more people waiting for you to fall. And I've realized that the biggest asset is my network. The biggest asset I have right now, also in this change period, but also at the company, at the position I was in, I have never actively treated people bad. I wouldn't say that there have not been positions or situations like termination agreements or something where you have to be the mean one. But it was never something that suited me. It was never something that made me better than someone else.
Yeah, and it's also never personal, isn't it? There are lots of businesses going through restructure, there are redundancies. It's never personal at the end of the day. And I think once you realize that as a leader, I think then your mindset or your approach to dealing with those tough situations is completely different as well. You are only as good as your village, isn't it? And your village is your team around you, isn't it?
And the team most likely knows stuff better than you do. I have people like, I will never be the crack in performance marketing, but I've always had people who are amazing in doing so surrounding me. And what I mentioned before, my whole life, I've always gathered up information. And I would say the only thing that I can probably do projectively better than others is I can combine as much information as possible to make a whole picture. And I'm a person who will plan the next steps while she's already doing step one. So I will always have plan B to Z in there somewhere. And I think this is one of the capabilities that good leaders should have. They should always plan for the next step, even if it's a better one. And they should, like, for me, it was always important to have people surrounding me who are better than me.
I totally agree with that. I believe you need to have the brightest minds, that is, people who can speak out, also listening to the quiet ones in the corner, because they usually have the best solutions as well, because they're taking time to absorb information. And then what they have to say is really important, tangible, and relatable to the business. And your point about having that helicopter view always and thinking, okay, this is the situation now, but where are we flying to next, in that analogy is so key. Frederike, I'm hearing that despite all the challenges of being a CEO and getting there, you actually enjoyed it and you did some really cool stuff, transformation and change. You have been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And, a lot of businesses are trying to change, trying to go transformation and are struggling with it there. If you're giving pieces of advice, or posting on LinkedIn, what are some top tips that you think you can share about change management and transformation that you think would help, the listeners out there?
I think the first thing is don't have an ego, because I think a lot of the change that needs to happen is currently bound in companies which were either led by a founder or by a management personality which has been there a long time. And understand that at some point, if it didn't work out, or if something didn't work out, it doesn't even have to be the whole thing, right? It's very hard to put your ego aside and to realize that you need help. So get yourself help. It doesn't always have to be a consultant, because I have a very diverse opinion about consultants as well. There can be either magic or they can break the magic really quickly. So get yourself help. In doing so, get yourself a different view on the situation. Take a look at the big players or the better players in the market, because it doesn't have to be stealing, it doesn't have to be copying, but they are doing something right that you most likely are not currently doing. But also take a look at various competitors in different markets, right? So if they have a similar market product or a different market fit, take a look at what they are doing, because respectively in their target groups, they're probably more successful. And last but not least, talk to your people, because as you mentioned before, the quiet ones in the corner have the best ideas. And when I take a look at what we've done at Audemars Piguet, where I was still a person in the corner, but I was never quiet, to be very honest. I was still a person.
That wouldn't surprise me though.
I was somewhere around the corner. They always asked. You were always able to give an opinion. The same thing at Cronext. The biggest game changers during restructuring came from people from the team. It came from sales. It came from marketing. Everyone was brainstorming. And sometimes it even came from people of opposing teams. So our best logistics decisions we made were actually driven by finance, because they wanted to make it easier for everyone involved. Do not take options or opinions out of the box, but get into the box.
Do you think a lot of it is why that works so well is because it was also communicated downwards? So this is what we're doing and this is why. And the communication helped open up those lanes for people to contribute and support and provide, alternatives. Was that a big determining factor?
I think transparency is one of the biggest game changers you have in business. For us, it was very important to get the team on board as quickly as possible. The last couple of weeks before you put the insolvency records on there, you are not allowed to talk to anyone. These were the hardest weeks of the whole business, because everyone knew something was going on. No one could put the finger on there. Afterwards, it got so much easier, because you all have a common goal and you also have common issues. So you know what the team is going through, because when you give them transparency, they also give you transparency. Because everyone knows no one will get fired for being honest, right? And the biggest aspect of when you are transparent from the top, they give you truth from the bottom. And at the same point, when you give transparency towards the market and the client, they will put in legal action anyways, and they will be very mad. And customer service is one of the most, if you have it in a bad situation of the business. And I know that because I've done it in the past as well, not in a bad situation, but I've done customer service. And even if they're happy, they are not. So everyone knew what was going on. There were no secrets left. And if there are no secrets left, there is no gossip. And if there is no gossip, there is no strain among the team, because everyone has the same kind of knowledge and no one can use it for their advantage or the disadvantage of others. Because this is what the biggest threat, I would personally say, in a restructuring or change process. If people have different origins of information, it's just a human thing that you want to come up on top, right? And there are certain characters who don't mind coming up on top with the detriment of others. And there are certain people who will use it against others as well. And if you take this chance away from them, everyone has the same level playing field.
I mean, that's it. It's obviously, human nature and human psychology, isn't it? That fight or flight survival mode, and people getting into their own head about what's actually happening when the information isn't clear. So transparency is such a big one. You talked about honesty and why it's so important to you as a leader, and I guess from an integrity perspective. Girl, I'm loving your LinkedIn posts, and avid LinkedIn poster because I think it's a good way to communicate what you're doing, what if you're a thought leader, putting that out there. But your presence is refreshingly candid. You're sharing both wins and challenges and, the snippets of the podcast that you've been on before. What kind of conversations do you hope to spark, especially about being transparent about your journey, and how can executives really embrace that? Storytelling as a tool and not here's my dog and here's me doing sports kind of thing.
To be very honest, in the beginning, I didn't even want to post. I'm one of these people. I have an empty Instagram account because I only use it primarily for stalking or looking for new songs for my playlist. So for me, that was a challenge in the beginning. And then it was very marketing driven. It was meant to give Chronex a voice when I started doing it. But then I realized I wouldn't say it's fake, but it's only one part of my personality because I'm witty and I'm quick and I sometimes make emotional decisions that not everyone can understand in the beginning, but in the end, they come with a reasoning, right? So for me, it was either I do it in my voice or I don't do it at all. And my voice is strictly sarcastic. And I love how I can put a post out there, which people who know me know how to read between the lines. They understand completely what I'm saying. And also they feel taken onto the journey. And then other people who are just like these stuck up suits who never really read the post, but just are like flying through them, deciding if they're on it or not. They don't understand it. And then I get this an intense kind of reaction, which I love. I just love how people are reacting to it. And for me, this is me. And I've taken a long time to come to the point where I not only be transparent in business, but also transparent with the challenges that the positions bring. And I don't think enough people are sharing challenges. And I'm not talking about I'm a founder and it didn't work out, or I do not know how to do my 9 to 5 and then still go shopping, because we all know this, right? We all have the same challenges, but this is I don't think this is something we should talk about, but we should talk about how do you actually feel when everything is working out, but you're still not happy? Because this is also something that we all feel. Or I don't think I'm special. I just have a special positioning in some certain kind of business area. And I never wanted to be like the guiding light for women in business, because I think I've had very cherished opportunities. Like I could not talk about how it feels like being mentored by a woman, because I was always only mentored by very much older males. And I have realized that my whole kind of character was built through only reporting to men, because I know how to handle men. I very openly have to say, leading young women is one of the biggest challenges I've ever faced. There will be a LinkedIn post coming on that. But no, but this is, for me, this is just me. And we can use LinkedIn for business. And I'm also not very fan of the flirty Tinder style LinkedIn, which I've also gathered is a trend. Please don't. For everyone listening, please
as well, yeah.
flirty text messages. I don't know how to handle it. But I love that we are now in a position where we can, and I am now in a position where I can say something and people feel either the need to listen to it and think, hey, wow, this is probably helping me a little bit just to think about it, or where other people feel so triggered, especially men above 50, feel so triggered that they have to spark a conversation about it, because this is exactly what I want to do. I want to converse about it.
Do you know what? I love the vulnerability that you've just, exposed there, which is so important, to actually say, I'm in a similar position of you where I have been mentored, I've been promoted, I have been accelerated in my career by men. They are my allies, and I think my first ally was my dad, who raising 6 girls and 2 boys. And he says, you're going to have to work twice as hard, but you belong in the room, you belong in that position, you should always have a voice and always be learning. And that's the thing, isn't it? So when you get into positions where the board, 90% of it is they're older and they're men, there's so many learnings to take there about how they challenge, how they interact, how they bring their points across, how they disagree. And it's a great thing to learn, especially because as women naturally we have emotion in us, isn't it? We always have that little corner of us that wants to feel and lead with emotion. But in a business setting, there are ways for you to lead without, in my opinion, bringing that side out, because in situations where you have to make decisions, it's not needed,
But it's interesting that you say that with your dad, because my dad, also I'm the youngest of 3, I have a younger brother and younger sister. And I always knew that I had opportunities that others didn't. But my dad is still under the opinion that men and women are no different. And it's so funny when you say your dad told you like you have to work twice as hard. My dad was always like, you have to work twice as hard if you want to get that far. But he's still astonished when I tell him that I didn't get a job because I'm a woman. He's always like, but why? But I wouldn't promote someone just because they're a man. And I'm just sitting there and I was like, oh, what a refreshing example of not being just an old white man who is discriminating.
Yeah, but it's easier for a man to say that, right? So the reason why, so for example, my dad said work twice as hard is also because I have this amazing melanin side of me. So there's the whole, you're a Black woman working twice as hard. But then he also says, well, when you go into the interview process, just see yourself as a candidate. To your dad's point, you're a candidate and just be the best there. Take away the gender. Just be the best. And then if they're hiring you, you're the best. And then if you happen to be a woman, kudos, even better. But it's hard, isn't it? Because you're having, everyone talks about imposter syndrome and all this going on. But yeah, ultimately the work, the experience, that will shine through, being known in the industry. When someone says, Frederike, she's known for this and that, there will be things they'll be naming, but it's all due to the credibility that you've built in your career. That's what shines through ultimately, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, it's always, I would probably guess it's the same with you. I judge people by the point I want to be judged, or in more detail, I treat people like I want to be treated.
Yeah.
And sometimes if someone is doing something incredibly nasty, I'm just sitting there. I was like, I like, why would you do that? Like, this is so unnecessary. Like, either we could have talked about it or we could have found a solution, but why would you do that? And I was always like, why am I not understanding these people? And I've had a great, great man in the last couple of weeks tell me, who was my grandfather. I read a book that he wrote a couple of years ago, just like some comments. Like, in that book, he said that you should be happy that you don't understand people like that, because you are not like that. And this is like the after World War generation, right? So this is like they've lived through all of it. And it was this book of how they are living with what their parents and their previous generations gave them, and how they do not understand how you could behave like that, especially with the German background, right? And for me, it was just like, okay, this explains a lot. I cannot understand people because I'm just not like that.
Yeah, it is a different mindset, actually. Growing up in Germany, I just love the fact that people, and maybe it's because historically, isn't it? They're very matter of fact. It's all about transparency. It's all about clarity. Yes, rules, lots of rules. Lots of rules. And then you travel to other countries where just the mindset and the culture is just very laissez-faire and very different.
We just feel very free when we travel somewhere.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, right. I think I still have those tendencies in me, just, efficiency, being on time. What is it we're trying to do? What's the process? But I think that's what makes us who we are, isn't it, as leaders, and it shapes you. I think in hindsight, a lot of what you've said is, your upbringing, the ethics and values that your parents instilled in you, that's shaped who you are in some way or another as a leader as well, isn't it? Don't you think?
Absolutely. I would say, like, I'm always saying I'm the worst mix you could have between my dad and my mom, because my dad is like this very like German architect, right? Engineer, very strict, very like down to earth, but all like going on the dirty construction side. But at the same time, like, you have to be on time, you have to be better than the rest, like very performance driven. And then I have this angel of a mom who's like, you have to understand people, put yourself into their shoes,
Have empathy.
don't ever do anything to your advantage. It always has to be a team advantage. This is, my parents made me. Being an older sister, which is probably the biggest aspect of them all, made me who I am as a team lead, because I need to make sure that everyone is performing, but at the same time, I need to make sure everyone feels safe. And this is something that I've only ever seen in women. I've never seen that. Like, I've seen particles of it in men, but like the whole prospect of going in there into the CEO position and growing into a position where you're only surrounded by men, but still coming out on top, because you are like, you have to be so tough. But then you turn around and other people raise children with an immense empathy and just like cultural diversity, but they turn around and they're the biggest CEO badass you can find. And this is something we as women had to prove ourselves all along, starting in school. And this is something like we can talk about it as much as we want. It's still a factor today. You have to you have to work twice as hard to get the same way where other men would be. And I think to see that there are so many women now, and to come back to when I was 18, I understood if you want to be CEO, you have to wear a gray pantsuit. So I wrote that down.
I remember that. Yes. No, I remember one of my first job interviews where I wasn't wearing a uniform. I was promoted. And then the first suit I went to go and buy was a gray pantsuit. I went crushed hat.
Black is too dark. Black is too dark. But gray, you can combine
gray,
with either rose or... It's ridiculous. This was the image, like you have to be a badass. The hair has to be tamed. You have to be like, you have this strong eyeliner. You're standing in your gray pantsuit crossing the man. And now I'm just like, I made myself so limited by trying to achieve that. And at the same time, I found myself. And today I would not buy myself a gray pantsuit because the gray really does not suit me. But at
the time, you had to do what you had to do to get to where you need to go. So, you know.
A lot of the other aspects, I intrinsically somehow elevated myself with. Everything went, not in the end, went right up until now, but the start and the finish are a very, very diverse option. It's not the same picture at all.
Of course. And I guess you're in a different phase of your life, isn't it? I think that's why the podcast is really good to have the conversation. So women know in their 20s, they probably need to graft a bit harder. You know, in your 30s, if you are lucky to get into that CEO position, it's then, okay, so who are you then? Redefine yourself and reinvent. And then what do your 40s and 50s look like? Just making sure, like you said, you have to set different goals for the different periods of your life that you're in, isn't it? To where you need to go. So important. So let's talk about reinvention. Obviously, you're no longer at Next. You are looking for the next stage, whether it's professionally or personally. What's important to you for your next chapter?
I've learned that integrity across a business is my most important factor. I thought 2 years ago, I thought I could work with people, even though I personally was not a fan of them on a personal level. I thought business-wise, well, if they make smart decisions, I can do that. I've learned that this is nonsense because I can much rather work with people who are not making the smartest business decisions, and I can support them in making smarter ones. But I will never again work with a person I do not would like to share a beer with, even though I don't drink alcohol. But
Yes. Yeah.
And so for me, it's integrity, it's transparency, because I want other people to be as transparent with me as I'm with them. And I'm looking for something with a turbulence, something with maybe an internal fatigue, something with something to stabilize, not something that is already settled in what they want to do, even though that might be the more demure and the more quiet option right now. And funnily enough, a lot of offers I get are for these quiet companies where I'm like, you make so much money. You have such a huge business. Why would you look for someone who brings trouble?
Yeah. Who wants to shake things up, isn't it?
Yeah. Chaos in a bottle. No, it's for me, I need an outlet for this energy. I need something that I can still motivate and change. And ideally, maybe a team that has not been this stable, who would like to have someone who leads them through the next chapter with a little bit of objectivity, but also with very subjective empathy.
I'm sure there are so many businesses like that are just ripe for reinvention, isn't it? So you are poised for that. You've spoken it into your universe. And I feel like now just hearing you speak and just you're in a position where you now know where it is directionally you want to go. It might even be a different industry, a different sector, because I truly believe being agnostic is the best way. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself to one sector. It's actually the skill set that you're bringing with you that is going to be the benefit.
Absolutely. And I think this is something also I worked on it without actively working on it. So I created my chain a year ago. Oh, sorry, I completely lost the plot. A year ago, I sat down with some friends of mine to come to a point where I put a CV on to actually have who am I as a CEO? Who am I as a person? And they were like, you bring chaos. Well, I didn't want to admit that, but yes. But they always were like, you are very passionate. Yeah, I'm also very passionate. And you bring change. And I never declared myself as change management because I was like, okay, I go into a company and I do restructuring. Yes, but this just came with a company. It didn't come as an intrinsic motivation. And I've realized that I've done that all my whole career. I've done restructuring, transformation, and change. And that's why I realized, okay, not a lot of people can work in this environment or actually would want to work in this environment also. So why not take it as my complete advantage and use it towards marketing myself.
I mean, it's a superpower, isn't it? When they ask you in the interview, so why should we hire you? What do you bring to the table? You need to know those 3 key areas that are your standout, and those are your superpowers, and you love it as well. So why not, play on that as well? We're coming to the end of the podcast where we want to empower, whether it's the next generation or women pivoting in their next career change or founders. What advice would you give to emerging leaders who want to drive change, but maybe they're feeling stuck, at the moment in rigid systems? And how can organizations better support women in executive roles? Because we know that the glass ceiling is still there, but we need to see more of them crack it and break it open.
So my advice, stop asking for permission. Do whatever you want to do. In the end, someone will be angry. Ideally, it's not the board lead, but even if it's the board lead and you made something good happen out for the company, don't ask for permission and don't do it for yourself. As long as you don't do it as a subjective opportunity for yourself, but also always for the team or the company, no one will ever be able to tell you that wrong. Also, even if you're in a smaller role as you perceive it right now, there will always be big opportunities. Always put your head on the table for a big opportunity. Never say that you do not belong in a position. Never tell yourself that you shouldn't do it right now, because even if you don't get it right now, people will know that you want to be better, you want to be bigger, so you will get the next opportunity. So always put your head on there, even if you only fulfill 20% of the requirements. And how do we support women better? Put them in power. I don't think it helps women to tell them we are communicating that we are so equal and so diverse, and we put PR on there. And it doesn't help to be putting people only in positions if the gender describes it. So for women, it's still marketing and PR, right? So stop doing that. Put them in front of finance. Put them in a board seat, P&L. Give them real ownership, because if people can have real ownership, they can either win or fail. But even if they fail, they bring peace to another person. So how about stop communicating we do it, but actually doing it? Because it's still a great marketing tool, right? Putting diverse positions in there, putting a woman in a board seat, great. And then she doesn't do anything? Doesn't matter. Those positions don't matter. The positions where you actually not only a face to the company, but create change within a company is more important, in my opinion.
There's some studies actually, Frederike, that have been done where they said men look at it, and if they fulfill 50% they apply, women want to tick all the boxes before they actually go for it. So it's one of those, just do it. What's the worst that can happen? Long list, short list, no list, at least you've actually gone for it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was the most unlikely candidate for CEO. We discussed it. We looked for other people. We tried out other people. In the end, I got it. In my personal opinion, I made the most change. So let's try it. And if you fail better next time.
Frederike, we always end the podcast with the Trailblazer takeaway tips. So it could be a mantra, mindset, a piece of advice for our listeners who want to lead with purpose and build something meaningful. What's your takeaway tips for us?
For me, change is not chaos. It's creating something better. And before you really go into changing everything else, ask yourself what you want to change about yourself first. Because you will only be as good as you feel while doing it. Something I didn't take into consideration along the way, something I've learned on the very hard way the last couple of months. If you're feeling good, you can make others feel better.
Frederike, thank you so much for sharing your story with clarity, with courage. You've really shown us that transformation isn't just strategy, because I know that word is thrown around a lot. It's really about mindset, culture, and just a commitment to doing things differently to make real change and make things happen. So it's been really good just to hear this honest, fluid conversation come through, which is what I love about you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share this information.
Where can people find you on the socials?
As I mentioned before, not on Instagram. I'm just stalking there. They can find me on LinkedIn. And this is right now the primary form until my next big challenge, I would say.
Well, I look forward to seeing where you land. It's been brilliant. We'll keep on following you. And for everyone who's been listening, thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to subscribe, to follow us. We can only grow, we can only continue the podcast if we have your support. And tell another woman, tell another male ally about the podcast, because, hey, we're all in this together. So thank you so much. Bye.